described his summit with President El-Sisi as great and distinguished. On sidelines of the G7 meetings, President El-Sisi also met with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and said he hoped that the upcoming period will witness active steps towards prompting bilateral ties and joint cooperation in politics, economy, security, and tourism. The two leaders particularly reviewed joint coordination in fighting terrorism and agreed to consolidate efforts in facing the mounting challenges in the Middle East.
Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli today said an underdrafting law to organize waste management is important as it proposes modern regulations to face long persisting as well as new problems. At a meeting held to tackle outstanding issues with the law, the Prime Minister said the government is interested in upgrading services and meeting citizens' demands for a clean environment and a decent life and a better future. And moving on, the Iraqi military said Welcome back. The Iraqi military said it has launched an investigation into a purported Israeli strike that killed a paramilitary fighter near Iraq's desert western border with Syria on Sunday. Meanwhile, Lebanon's President Michel Aoun said Lebanon had a right to defend itself after other Israeli drone strikes against his country on Sunday that he likened to a declaration of war. Minna Dessouy reports.
Two Israeli drones crashed early on Sunday in the Lebanese capital Beirut's southern suburbs, which are dominated by the heavily armed Hezbollah. Only hours later, Israeli drones struck a military position belonging to a Palestinian faction in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley before dawn on Monday. In response, Lebanese President Michel Aoun's office quoted him as saying on Twitter that what happened was similar to a declaration of war which allows us to resort to our right to defending our sovereignty. The presidency said the president discussed the Israeli assault with the country's United Nations Special Coordinator John Kubis on Monday. He told Kubis that strikes violated UN Security Council Resolution 1701 that ended in July 2006 war between Israel and Hezbollah. Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri separately met Lebanon's interior and defense ministers and army chief on Monday to discuss security issues, his office said. Although Israel has not claimed responsibility for the Beirut attack, Hezbollah leader Nasrallah described it as the first Israeli attack inside Lebanon since the 2006 war.
Israel said today it was cutting by half the amount of fuel it supplies to Gaza's only power plant. Israeli occupation forces said the cut is in response to rocket attacks from the Palestinian territory and will be in effect until further notice. An army statement said also Israeli warplanes hit militant positions in the Gaza Strip this morning, also in response. Gaza has long suffered from a shortage of electricity and chronic blackouts. And Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates renewed a call on Monday for peace talks between Yemen's government and southern separatists, urging a ceasefire following deadly clashes. The Yemeni government has previously insisted it would only take part in talks after separatist forces withdraw from positions they seized in interim capital Aden earlier this month. Riyadh and Abu Dhabi both technically backed the internationally recognized government of President Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi against Houthi rebels based in Yemen's north. In a joint statement Monday, the Saudi and Emirati foreign ministers urged both sides to cooperate with a coalition committee and to attend talks in the Saudi city of Jeddah. Spokesman for the Arab coalition in Yemen, Turki al-Malki, said today that coalition forces intercepted and downed two Houthi rebel drones launched towards the kingdom from Yemen. Meanwhile, Yemen's Houthi rebels said they had attacked a military target in the Saudi capital Riyadh with armed drones, though the Saudi coalition fighting in Yemen dismissed the report. U.S. President Donald Trump today offered an olive branch to Iran, opening the door to diplomacy on the last day of the G7 summit after French President Emmanuel Macron invited Iran's foreign minister to Biarritz for talks on the standoff between Washington and Tehran. Trump told journalists that they had been wrong to report that he was blindsided by the visit of Mohammad Javad Zarif to the summit sidelines, and said that while he thought it was too soon for a meeting, he had no objections to it. He indicated an openness to discussions with Iran on a new nuclear deal after his withdrawal of internationally brokered 2015 nuclear deal last year, and said he was not looking for a regime change. Meanwhile, Iran said it had sold the oil aboard a tanker that was released this month after being detained for 6 weeks by the British Overseas Territory of Gibraltar. Iranian government spokesman did not identify the buyer nor say whether the oil had been sold before or after the tanker's detention in the Strait of Gibraltar on July 4th. The spokesman said the sale and delivery of the oil would go ahead despite the ship being tracked by the United States since it set sail 3 days later for the eastern Mediterranean, carrying 2.1 million barrels of oil. Sudan's newly created Sovereign Council formally declared a state of emergency in the city of Port Sudan following tribal clashes that police say have killed at least 16 people. Brigadier Althanya Abu Hajja, spokesman for the Sovereign Council, said both the acting governor and the head of the National Security Service for the Eastern Red Sea state, of which Port Sudan is the capital, were dismissed on Sunday. This comes at a delicate time for Sudan, as Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok is forming a government according to a power-sharing agreement signed earlier this month between the ruling military council and protesters' representatives. A Turkish opposition newspaper reported today that 5 generals from the Turkish army have handed in resignations in the wake of a military council meeting earlier this month. The Supreme Military Council, chaired by Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan, convened to discuss promotions, dismissals, and placements of the high-ranking military personnel on August 1st. On the ground, Syrian government forces massed in the country's northwest, pressing an offensive over rebel-held areas bordering Turkey. The Syrian military has since Wednesday seized the key town of Khan Sheikhun and overran the countryside to the south, encircling a Turkish observation post in northern Hama. These were all the political news. Now it's time for the business updates, where Egypt's stock market indices went down in Monday's dealings, being affected by selling operations of foreign funds and corporations. Capital market for companies listed in the bourse lost £3.7 billion to end deals at £753 billion. The benchmark EGX 30 index fell 0.35% to reach 14,291.03 points, and the new capped EGX 30 index was also down by 0.5%. Officials from the Ministry of Public Business sector held talks on Monday with a Chinese delegation headed by China's ambassador to Egypt on implementing undergoing projects between the ministry and China, mainly the establishment of the first factory for electric cars in Egypt. The meeting reviewed government measures to facilitate investment in this field in a bid to keep up with the international demand for using environment-friendly electric cars. US President Donald Trump said today trade talks with China were more meaningful than at any time, adding that delegations would very shortly resume talks. Trump's comments followed similar comments by China's most powerful trade negotiator, saying that they are willing to solve the problem through consultation and cooperation with a calm attitude. Oil prices, which had earlier fallen on concerns the tariff dispute would crimp world demand, recovered in European trading. Brent crude futures rose 1.18% to $60.04, while the US crude gained 1.26% to $54.85 a barrel.